Bambiz presents Elder Law Growth, the podcast that helps elder law and estate planning attorneys attract clients without wasting time or money. I'm your host, Jim Blake. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Elder Law Growth podcast, where we share powerful strategies to help elder law and estate planning attorneys grow their practice and reach more clients. I'm your host, Jim Blake, and today we've got a fantastic episode lined up for you. Our guest today is Victoria Collier, a dynamic force in the legal world who has not only built a successful law practice, but also turned her focus to helping elder attorneys build real value in their firms. As the founder and CEO of Quid Pro Quo, she is an expert at showing attorneys how to position their practices for a future sale and how to effectively use workshops to connect with more clients. Trust me, you don't want to miss the insights she's about to share. Victoria, welcome.
Thanks, Jim. It's great to be here. As an elder law attorney myself, I love this topic.
Well, you've done some really amazing work helping attorneys build and grow their practices. And for those listening who might just be starting out or looking to take their firm to the next level, what are some key strategies that they can implement to start adding value to their firm right away?
Well, first is, that I would share is that you don't have to have it all figured out in the beginning. When I started my law firm right out of law school, I had no money and I used my first client's payment to literally secure my first month, my last month, and buy my furniture. And that's how I started my law firm. And that's how I continued to run my law firm for many years, is just, roll up your sleeves and get it done and stop comparing yourself to other people and other businesses. So that's the first tip I would say, is just, get in there and take action and do something.
Yeah, I always myself, that comparison game can be a very big trap to get yourself into. And comparing your day one to somebody else's 5 years or 10 years, that can put you in a bad place.
It certainly can. It certainly can. But at some point, you do have to start looking ahead and not just in the day to day, just as you said, because if you're going to build value in your firm, there are certain things you can do to do that. But the first is having people understand, why is that even important? Why is it important for me to build value in my firm when I'm here just to help other people? Because isn't that why people get into law to begin with, is to help other people?
That is the reason. I hear a lot. I mean, that kind of goes into like one of the questions I wanted to ask was like, how can attorneys step back and start viewing their practice as a valuable asset that can grow and then be sold down the line?
Well, the first thing they have to do is change their mindset and stop looking at their business as their job and actually see it as a business and not a law practice. And there is a very big difference between I am a lawyer and I provide legal services in an area that hopefully I'm passionate about, versus I own a business and that business provides services to people that I'm passionate for. And so if we're doing that, then we look at the business different and we make different decisions. Because if I continue to, for example, think that I'm a lawyer who does a certain type of law, there's only so many hours in the day. There's only so much energy I can put into it. And let me share with you that as you age, your energy tends to deplete unless you're doing a whole lot of self-care. And a lot of lawyers that are small to, solo to small firms don't do enough self-care.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. I definitely think back to when I even started this, and I'm like, I don't know if I'd have the energy even now to like do all the things that we did, back then to get it up and running. That's definitely a consideration. We talk to like a lot of firms in all different sizes, right? From those small solo practices that are just now hanging up their shingle for, elder law, to ones that have been doing this and have multiple locations and multiple states in some cases as well, on states. How did you go about deciding like, this is how big I want to be? These are how many families I want to help, instead of saying, I'm just going to help what they come in when I hit a capacity. Like, how did you start the scaling? How did you figure out what your desired future was? And then how did you kind of build backwards to get there?
Well, it's interesting because I never actually achieved my ultimate goal. But from the very beginning, I wanted to be a large law firm with multiple locations. And why? I don't know, other than I always want bigger and better. I'm from Texas, everything's bigger in Texas. And so I have always had the personality that if I can do more, I can help more. And so it just made sense to me to have multiple locations and all that. So from the beginning, I have always had coaches that I paid. There is a very big difference between coach and mentor. So I just from the beginning wanted something larger. But I knew that you have to sometimes crawl before you can run. Sometimes you can skip the walking part and go right from a crawl to a run. What I do know is that too many people spend their time in the crawl and never get out of that because they don't think big enough, Jim. I think is the thing is that somewhere along the lines, we have been taught to be conservative. And certainly with lawyers, I mean, we're taught to be very conservative and look for the risk and advise on the risk. But as a business owner, sometimes you have to live differently and you have to make decisions differently from a business standpoint. So from the beginning, I had coaches helping me do that.
So let's go back to what you were saying just a minute ago, because I think that's interesting. And some of the attorneys that are listening to this may not know the difference. How would you define mentor and how would you define coach? And what are those differences that they need to be on the lookout for?
Well, you would know the difference at the end of a relationship if what you think is the end of the relationship. And what I mean by that is a coach is going to be there for you and provide guidance to bring out the best in you when you're paying them. And when you stop paying them, they stop paying you any attention or any mind, right? They don't care about your success. And maybe that's harsh. Maybe they care about your success, but they're not going to spend any more of their own energy on it. Whereas a mentor is going to oftentimes start off as a paid coach. And even as a mentor, they might still get paid, but they are interested in your success, regardless of whether or not they're getting paid. They're interested in you, regardless of what the paid relationship is.
So is there a time and a place for the coach relationship versus the mentor relationship, or should they always be on the lookout for more of the mentor type role?
I think that mentorship is very special and develops naturally, and that you cannot create that intentionally. I think that you have to start with coaches, and sometimes they turn into mentors, and sometimes they don't.
Awesome. Well, I kind of wanted to move into a little bit of how do you position the law firm for a sale? I know it's not something that a lot of attorneys are thinking about until they're thinking about it, right? And it's almost a little bit too late. What are
Sometimes
some
it
of
is.
the common mistakes you see? How can attorneys start preparing their practice for a potential sale now? And on a side note, should they have their name be a part of their practice, or should their name be more of a generic name for a practice that
Yeah.
could easily be sold without being tied to, like, if it was me, the Blake Law Firm, for example?
Right. Right. And that's a great question. It's a discussion that happens often. So, first of all, as far as positioning, people do wait until they are exhausted, tired, or have health. Then they often have to have a fire sale, which means that if they sell it at all, that they're getting a lot less for it than they could otherwise. But many people still don't even see the value that they have, and they just close their doors or they hand their files off to a colleague, which to me is sad, when in fact you could get some compensation for all the time that you've spent over these years. And I personally sold my own elder law firm in 2020 because I didn't have an option. I had no money and I was going to do something else, and so I needed to sell it versus just close it down. So number one is know that if you don't have value, you can build value. Number two, when you build value, you should sell that value. And so, how do you build the value? Number one is you have to know your numbers. You have to have profit loss statements. I did, in fact, sell a law firm. It was not an elder law firm, but I did sell a law firm where they didn't even have profit loss statements. They had bank registers and bank statements that we were sharing with a buyer. That alone is going to really minimize what your value or your perceived value is of the firm itself. So things like that, just paying attention to the data, or at least collecting the data so that you can share that with someone else, is going to add tens of thousands of dollars just to the value of your firm. Then on top of that, having at least one key employee that knows everything that's going on in the firm, and that key employee is at least willing to stay during a transition period, if not forever, because that is the right hand that's feeding the knowledge of continuation in the firm. So that's valuable. If you have automated marketing that has the phone ringing, whether you're out there networking and shaking hands and kissing babies or having lunch with a billion financial advisors, if you've got some marketing coming in that's consistent, that's predictable, That's valuable. And the more you can separate yourself from the firm as far as it being reliant on you, the more valuable your firm is.
And so, with that being said, what would like a multiple be that somebody could be thinking like on a bad side and a good side of like, what could I get for my law practice? But on another question personally, so I own a marketing agency, which completely different than a law firm. But at the same time, there's different schools of thought out there on how to, build that value. And you brought a lot of them up. One of them that I'm familiar with that pretty well, there's a book called Traction, which talks about like, SOPing everything, making sure you have an operator because you're probably more of the visionary and this and that. I mean, how familiar are you with that type of a system or an operating system, I guess you could call that? Is stuff like that important when you're building up your law firm for sale?
So, first of all, I'm very familiar with the book, and I'm a big proponent of having standard operating procedures for every role. How important is it when you're selling? It all depends on the buyer, to tell you honestly. When I am coaching with clients or when I'm doing the valuation, depending on whether they have 1 year or 10 years before they want to exit, will determine whether or not I recommend they get certain SOPs in place and things like that.
And what about like if, I've been doing this now for, let's say I have a 15-year elder law practice, and how am I ballparking my value before I start to have these conversations on what I'm worth?
I highly recommend that, in order to ballpark, we should get a valuation, right? And you asked about multiples. And so multiples can go anywhere from zero, worst case scenario, which used to be very, very common and still is among people who want to buy and they are familiar with the old traditional, you have no other option. So I'll just take it from you. And oh, aren't I the generous one by paying you 15%, 20% of what comes in off your list? Whether or not I, as the buyer, do anything with that list, right? I could cultivate it and make lots of money, or I could just kind of wait and see what trickles in. The seller has no control over that. They're just, oh, aren't you just grateful that I'm giving you anything? So that's a zero multiple, and you're just getting whatever scraps are being thrown your way based on your phone number, your website, or the list of clients you've had before. So that's a zero multiple, all the way up to, I would say, 1.5 generally on the gross revenues, or anywhere between 2.5 and about 3.8 on the either EBITDA or seller's discretionary earnings. See, people aren't even familiar with the term seller's discretionary earnings because we've been operating off of EBITDA for so long. And EBITDA is just wrong and skewed. But if you're using EBITDA, know that it's not only skewed, but you will be screwed. So you want to use the seller's discretionary earnings in most cases.
Yeah, I know that's a big thing because people obviously when you build up your own law practice or business in general, right? It's your baby, and so you're gonna think it's in your mind worth more than it is. And I know that a lot of people have different trains of thought on like the value of it, and then they come back well, I guess when you're doing sales negotiations as well, right? It's probably just like any business, right? Someone's gonna probably come in there with a pretty big offer that you're entertaining, and then after due diligence and things like that, they probably lowball it a little bit at the end.
I don't see that a whole lot, actually. What I see is that people are hesitant to give any figure until they've done a ton of due diligence. And you're like, come on, we're naked already. Give us, you have to have some sort of idea what you think this is worth. And that's why, like when we are helping someone sell their firm, we do the valuations and then we have a valuation opinion letter. We share all that from the beginning so that they know what we're walking into, right?
So on the marketing side, how critical do you think having an online presence is when it comes to making your law firm attractive to potential buyers?
I think that you have to have an online presence. It just legitimizes your business, period. And it shows that you are a business. And again, not just a lawyer who practices law. And to tie that into your other question that I never answered, which is how important is it for your name to be generic versus your own name? I think it all depends on number one, what service type are you in? How big is your law firm already? And what kind of presence do you have out there? For example, when I sold my law firm 3 years before I sold it, I changed. So I always had a branded name, but my last name had to be attached to it. So it was the Elder and Disability Law Firm of Victoria L. Collier. That's very long, but it said what we did and it said who I was for ethics reasons. Then 3 years before I sold it, I changed it to a DBA, doing business as the estate and asset protection law, because I felt that the word elder law was becoming a little stale. I wanted to really cross the bridge between estate planning and what is actually what people in their head say. Nobody sees themselves as elder. That's why I was trying to get away from that. But what they do want to do is they want to protect assets. So I wanted to tie in the estate planning contingent with the old people who don't consider themselves old but want to protect assets. So I changed it to the estate and asset protection law firm, and I dropped my name off of it. So when I sold it, it was easier transition for her because my name wasn't on it. She wasn't in my shadow, under my wing anymore, and it was still was a strong name. Now, if you have a person who's buying your law firm that uses their own name, they might say, "Hey, I like that name and I'm going to start using that and be more global." But if you have somebody who has a strong name and now you have two competing names, they may not want to use your name anyway, or they might want to keep your name and then at some point blend the two. Or they might just want to buy your name because it's so awesome to keep any other competitors from buying it.
So it can kind of go any way.
It can go anyway.
What would be some red flags then that would be like, hey, this law firm is less attractive now because of X, Y, and Z?
Yeah. So, gosh, some really red flags, really messy financials. Certainly bar complaints. Somebody who's moved several times, so they don't really have a location. And that's okay if we want to be virtual anyway, but it's not okay if you're really looking at street traffic or somebody who has a reputation. Another red flag would be 100% word of mouth marketing, because if you're not there anymore, it really is a detriment to the value of the firm, unless there's a long transition period. And I don't ever recommend that. I would say another red flag is paralegals who maybe have been there as long as you and or maybe your same age. And they may say they want to stay, but they're tired too. Those are all red flags.
And you brought up something virtual. And with your experience and how things have shifted, right, since 2020, do you find that a virtual firm is going to get the same type of a value as a firm that has physical locations?
Yes. Yes. I don't see that there's any difference from a value standpoint. It also depends on, again, the nature of what you're providing. So, for example, if you're a trademark firm, that's federal. So it really doesn't matter that you're virtual because you can help people and likely have been helping people across the whole United States. Same with immigration, same with veterans benefits, same with Social Security. But if you're estate planning and you're elder law and you still sit down and everybody, like in my elder law practice, our conference room looked like a kitchen table. It looked like a living room where you were in someone's home. That's hard to do virtual. It's not impossible, but for those that are more high touch customer service, I wouldn't say it devalues the firm if you're virtual. It's just a matter of how do you manage the processes and keep that high level of customer service.
Oh, that's good to know. Yeah, because I know a lot of people sometimes they're skirting with the idea still of like, okay, I can do this virtually. Is that going to hurt me long term? And it sounds like it won't hurt them. And I find too that like, elder law and estate planning, since that's what we're helping people with mostly over here, 5 years ago, I'd say no. But since 2020 and as the people that are doing some of this planning for elder law and estate planning, as they're getting older, they're more familiar with the technology that we have available to us, and they're more comfortable doing things virtually. So I think that line between those that are going to be diehard must be in person, and that I'm okay with doing it, virtually, is being so blurred now that you can't go wrong.
Yeah,
so
they're all online talking to their grandbabies anyway. So
that's why they're on Facebook. That's why
That's
Facebook
right.
does so well, because they want to see these kindergarten pictures
That's right.
and
That's
stuff
right.
like that. So.
That's right.
Well, kind of transition a little bit. I know that you've been an advocate for attorneys hosting workshops. So I just wanted to get your opinion on why is the workshop model effective, and especially for elder law and estate planning attorneys?
Why it was so effective for me, and I continue to believe it's effective now, is that it gives people the opportunity to interview you without coming into your office. People oftentimes have never needed a lawyer, and now they do. And lawyers are by nature, for whatever reason, considered intimidating. One of the most common statements people would tell me is, "Oh, You're not at all like what I expected. And so I would always say, well, what are you expecting? Well, they're expecting the big bald guy that's on TV that's screaming at them about the benefits they can get and, all this kind of stuff. And in elder law, I mean, we're just not like that. We choose this because it's the happier, friendlier, hugging kind of law. And while I was military and while I may have, a solid jaw sometimes, I'm the kind of person you can come in and, give a hug to. And so seminars give people that opportunity to size you up, if you will. You can set up the expectations for your client or prospective clients. You can outline who we are here to see, who we are not, so you can help people self-select out and self-select in. So I really like that aspect of it as well. The other is you can prepare one talk and have it managed to where you can give a 10-minute on that or a 3-hour on that exact same piece of information. There's so many things you can do from one seminar. I wrote an entire book just based on one 3-hour seminar, and then we chopped up those chapters and did all kinds of stuff with it. So from a marketing standpoint, it's not just how we connect with our clients in person, but that we can then make 20 different pieces out of it that continues to work for us.
And earlier in our conversation too, you had mentioned that when you were starting to, plan your exit, I guess you could say, you didn't even host those anymore. Can you talk a little bit about how you transitioned yourself out from being the workshop host into just the business owner and having a team of people do that for you? And I guess a second part of that question, because I hear it all the time, were your presenters attorneys or were they non-attorney spokespeople?
So I am a huge advocate of promoting the firm and the team on the firm. So in my presentations, I actually, when we were doing PowerPoints, I had slides on every single person in the team and what they do for the business and what they do for the clients. So the prospects who are watching this knew exactly who they might be seeing when they came to the team. So again, that's taking me out of it from the beginning. I had a social worker on my staff. I also had paralegals. So they did the seminars. And if I had a lawyer, sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. Sometimes they did the seminars. But really, I relied on my non-attorney staff to do the seminars because it's education. It's not legal advice. It was a way to ensure that we were not giving out free legal advice at these because everybody wants, well, I've just got this one question. Well, that would be great in a consultation. What we're going to do for you is schedule a 15-minute intake session with our intake specialist to see if having a consultation would even be right for you. So we could just deflect very easily that way, right? So I had my social worker and I had my paralegals doing the seminars. And I had to be in the room when they presented it. Talk about how difficult that is because the people are there, they see I'm there, right? They want to hear from me, but they're not hearing from me. And so they've got to hear from somebody else. So I would introduce them and I would introduce the reason why they were speaking versus me, not because they're in training, but because they are the one who is going to be the first line that these people talk to in the room when they call us. That's, so you have to give people reasons. And when you give people reasons, this is what I learned from my mentor is whenever you say because, it doesn't matter what comes after that, the people are going to follow, right?
Did you notice, because this is going to say, I know that people ask me this all the time, when you transitioned, right, into having your paralegals and staff do these presentations for you, did the conversion rate or the number of people that attended the workshop to sign up for your 15-minute intake session, did that number dramatically change one way or the other or stay the same?
Whenever there's any major change, no matter what it is, whether you've increased prices, whether you've gone from from hourly to flat fee, whether you've introduced a new person, I would say there's always what's called a restriction because everybody is hesitant about how this is going to go. So that energy, that hesitant energy is out there. And I'm a big believer in energy creates all. But if you can withstand that restriction, whether that's 2 weeks to 3 months, and just keep pushing through, then there's always then what's called an expansion. There has to be. Nature just works that way. Or in some places, a combustion, which is a great thing. So yeah, I would say that I would always see a small restriction and then we would see an expansion. And I would say that their numbers were as good, if not better than my own.
Did you ever host these as webinars or were they all physical locations in person?
We did webinars as well. And we also made evergreen webinars. So it felt like they were live, but they weren't live. We had Q&As, even that kind of stuff.
Did you find that one was better than the other? Did webinar perform better than in person? Did in person perform better than webinar?
I don't think there's anything better than live. Whether live is on Zoom or whether live is in person, live is live to me. But live is not the same on Zoom if you're not used to speaking in front of a camera and you see yourself and you're all stiff and all that kind of stuff. I think if you're well versed at any medium, live is live. And secondarily, recorded is better than nothing.
Very good. I like to hear the insights from someone that's actually done multiple of those options because, yeah, some people are like gung ho one way or the other. And it's like, yeah, no, I think that depending on the size of the firm, right? Our personal recommendation is always if you want to get more clients out of it and help more families initially, right? A faster, within 30 days of doing a workshop, I'm going to have more clients. You can't go wrong with doing that in person to start with.
Right.
As you get better and you start delivering a message, and like you said, you have this really great presentation and you want to offer that in a different way, maybe you want to expand your footprint a little bit wider in your area, yeah, offer that as an online option and kind of see how it goes from there and then make changes and move it accordingly. Sounds like we're on the right track on that. And so I guess we'll go into that too, right? So you get all these people that come to workshops, not all of them become clients. You get people that sign up for your webinars. Again, not all of them are becoming clients. So what should these law firms do with all of those new potential client leads that are being generated from these efforts in order to engage with them and hopefully either get a referral from them or a new client out of them long term?
So what they should do is create a 1-year touch campaign where they're giving them continued value of information. So whether that's an email, an e-newsletter, an actual print newsletter, a phone call once a quarter, whatever. But I would say you need at least a 1-year touch campaign for every single person, whether they've hired you or haven't hired you.
But aren't you annoying them?
Am I doing what?
That's a question we always get.
Annoying?
Some law firms are like, well, aren't we annoying those folks? What would you say to that?
I would say that yes, you are annoying them if you are just asking for their business every single time you touch them. If you are saying, hey, you were at the seminar, why haven't you hired us? Hey, you were at the seminar, didn't you get value? Let me say it clearer for the people in the back. You have to be providing value to them. And so that is sharing information, that's sharing content, that's sharing, it's completing the conversation they already have in their own head. They're not sharing with you. It's just giving great information like case studies and scenarios. And at some point, something's going to touch them and say, oh my God, that's me. You keep talking to me. And that's not annoying. That's actually helpful. It's welcomed. And they're not going to share this with you, but they look forward to these emails. You want to have enough quality communication to where they feel like they know you before they get, and they feel like you know them before they even come into your office, because now it's not a matter of are they going to hire me? It's a matter of just writing the check. So no, annoying it's not even in my vocabulary. So
No, I completely agree with that. The big takeaway there is yes, providing value. And if I could add one thing to that, really it's I think you've mentioned it, but I want to make it very clear for the audience, is providing regular valuable communication, because some people are like, yeah, I follow up with these folks. I send out a quarterly email newsletter, or I send out every 6 months or something. They forgot you by that point. And so I just want to say, like, we recommend weekly, but because that's the thing, right? If they came up to a workshop and they're obviously interested in elder law or estate planning, they're interested in your world. And so if you're not following up with them regularly and you wait 6 months, they're going to find another attorney's marketing message or meet somebody else or get a referral. And you want to be that one that's providing consistent, regular value to them so that your name's top of mind when it's time for them to make that decision.
absolutely. I sign up for things all the time. And so my daughter rides horses. And so there's one person who gives a lot of information about horses and training them and all that kind of stuff. And I get an email probably every day. And I never look at it. I never do because I don't have the time. And so then I get this pop up like this past week that says, do you want us to stop sending this because you never open them? Yes or no? And I literally said, no, I don't want you to stop sending them because at some point I do want to look at it. Yeah, I signed up for a reason and I do want to look at it. It's just we don't know what's going on in other people's lives, right? Or when they're going to have the chance. But at some point, you are relevant for them and you want to be there for them when that moment happens. And you can't decide that. They have to decide that. The best we can do is be there and available when it's time.
Exactly. Well, we've covered a lot of valuable ground today. So From building a firm with long-term value to hosting workshops that connect with potential clients, your insights have been incredibly helpful. I wanted to ask one final question. Looking back on everything that we've discussed, what is the one question you think every attorney should ask themselves after listening to this episode?
It's a two-part question, and that is, am I doing enough so that I'm happy with where I'm at and where I want to go? The second part is, am I happy, right? And if I'm not, what do I need to do to be happy? And that's where the am I doing enough, right? So am I doing enough to be happy with what I am doing and where I want to be?
Yeah, happy. If you're not happy, why are you doing it, really, is what it comes
That's right.
down to. So where can our listeners go to learn more about the work you're doing and how they can apply these strategies to their firm?
Thanks, Jim. So our website is quidproquolaw.com. That's where we have information on why we do what we do and how we do it. But also, if people are on Facebook, we have a private Facebook group called The Art of Buying and Selling Law Firms. And then we also have a podcast called Smart Lawyers Position to Transition.
Awesome. Well, definitely check those resources out. Thank you so much, Victoria, for joining us today and sharing your knowledge. I know our listeners will find this information incredibly useful. And if anybody that's listening to this wants to look at those resources, you can also check out the show notes, and they'll be listed in there as well. Thanks for tuning in to Elder Law Growth. If you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. We'll be back soon with more tips and strategies to help your law firm thrive. Thanks for listening.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Elder Law Growth Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things marketing for elder law and estate planning law firms. Here you can find all of the tools and skills you need to market your own practice without wasting your time. If you like this podcast, please leave us a review wherever you're listening. And if you're ready to take the pressure off and let our team handle your marketing, visit Bambiz.net and book a free call with us today.